What's going on, you guys? Thanks for tuning in to another video, and today I'm going to run you guys through a full modification list of my 2003 EVO 8. Let's do it. So this is my 2003 Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 8. For those of you asking and wondering, yes, this is a factory color that was available on these cars, and for the most part this is the factory paint on the car. The color code for this car is Y01, lightning yellow, and it was available on the 2003 to 2005 Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 8. So this color was not available on the 9s at all, despite this one looking like a 9. It does have the EVO 9 front bumper on it, but we'll get into that here in a second. I've owned this car for about 3 years now. I bought it with right at 54.5 thousand miles on it, and at the time of making this video the car has right at 71,600 miles on it. So despite what people think, the car is not a garage queen. I do drive it quite a bit, but in the 3 years that I've owned the car, I've been able to do quite a few things to the car that I believe make a really well-rounded street car. The car does make 511 wheel horsepower and 406 pounds of torque. This is on a stock block, which I think is right about the sweet spot for these cars. Any bit more than what it's making right now, and I'd say we're pushing it a little bit too much. The car and the setup does have a little bit left in it, especially the turbo. But for all intents and purposes, I'm not really inclined to push this setup any further than I already have, especially because the goal would be to just build a separate 2.0 liter on the side and eventually swap it in. But for now, we're gonna leave it how it is. The way that the car sits right now, I would say that I'm pretty happy with. I'm not content with, because there's always something to be changed. There's always, minor imperfections, but overall, I'm really happy with the car and the way that it sits right now. And I'm fortunate to just be able to, get into the car, turn the key, start it up, and drive it on a daily basis if I want to. Anyways, enough of me rambling, so let's get into exterior modification. So just like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the car does have an EVO 9 front bumper on it. This was already on the car when I bought it, and to be honest, I'm very thankful that it did, because I prefer the EVO 9 bumper over the EVO 8 bumper. The EVO 8 bumper looks really good with a nose chop and a huge front mount intercooler and lip, but I am of the opinion that the EVO 9 front bumper looks better. I've also got custom license plates. As you can see here, I felt like this was a necessity. I went back and forth about doing custom plates, and thanks to Jason, aka Low PSI, it was a no-brainer to do a custom license plate. This license plate actually took 9 months to come in. Long story short, there's 3 plate machines here in the state of Washington, and apparently 2 of them were broken and only 1 of them was serviceable. So it took me about 9 months to get that custom plate in, but worth it once I got it done. This GSR badge I sourced from Etsy. You can see the placement of it is pretty much identical to where the MR badge sits on the MR trims. For those of you that do know, GSR is technically not a trim available on these cars here in the US domestic market, but it is an option overseas. But this is more of a novelty than anything, but there are some hits of red around the car that really bring that badge together. You'll also see that I'm running the JDM headlights as well in this car, so I got a really good deal on these while I was overseas. I bought them from a guy who was getting rid of them, and they needed to be refinished. I think I paid maybe $680 shipped for them. They needed to be refinished at the time, so once I got a hold of them, I sanded them down, re-cleared them, and to be honest, they look amazing on the car. I'm just glad that I didn't have to spend the $1,500 to $1,800 in order to get a brand new set of them. If the color of the car doesn't catch your eyes, probably the next thing that does catch your eyes would be the blue wheels. So let's talk about these. These are the TE37 SLs in a Hypermax blue, not to be confused with a Mag blue. The Mag blue TE37s are significantly darker than these. These have quite a bit more pigment in them. The blue is a lot more vivid, and you might be able to see it on camera here. It's got a lot of metallic in it as well. When the sun hits these hyper blue wheels, it pops so hard, and that's exactly what I wanted for the car. Originally, it had black wheels on it, and the black wheels kind of got lost in the wheel well and didn't break up well, and I wanted something that popped a lot harder. So I decided to go out on a limb and try the Hyperblue TE37s. This particular spec of wheel is very hard to get. You can get the 18 by 9.5 plus 22s, but to find it in a Hyperblue, you're probably not going to find them. It's a really hard spec to get a hold of. One of the common responses that I get for the car when people see it in person is, you know, I wasn't expecting blue wheels on a yellow car to look good, but I don't hate it, and it actually works pretty well. And I would say I agree with it. Earlier this year, I did send all of the Brimbos out to get repowder coated. I opted to go with a brighter red than factory. I'm a huge fan of OEM Plus, and I felt like the brighter red would just kind of like bring out that original look of the car. And the red on the Brimbos kind of ties in with the sticker on the TE37s and the GSR badge on the front and back. So all in all, I'm very satisfied with how the exterior is looking so far. For the brakes on this car, I am running a full set of R1 concept brake pads and rotors. The car previously had a set of race pads on it, and to be honest, they were so noisy and left so much residue on my wheels. And for what I used this car for, switching over to the R1 Concepts drill slotted rotors and the pads was the move for me. Some people argue that drill slotted is not necessary, and I'll leave that up to you to figure out what works best for your setup. But overall, I'm super satisfied with the brake setup on this car. I think it's perfect for what this car does on a daily basis. Next, on the exterior, we are running the full carbon fiber lip kit from Rexpeed. So the front is the EVO 9 SE lip. On the sides, we're running the carbon fiber side skirt extensions. And then as you can see on the rear, we've also got the rear bumper extensions, all of which are from Rexpeed. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with carbon fiber. I'm a big fan of OEM body lines on a car, and one of the things that I was nervous about with the yellow was that the carbon fiber would break up the yellow too much. I've only had this kit on for about 1.5 months now, and I'm a little bit undecided as to whether I love it. There's a part of me that loves how the EVO 9 carbon fiber lip looks on the front, and there's another part of me that just wants to put the yellow back on. So drop a comment down below, guys. What do you think about the carbon fiber on the yellow? Do you think it's too much? Do you feel like it would look better without it, or do you think it's just right? A modification also worth noting is the OEM rain guards from Mitsubishi. So these are an absolute must on a car. They are not only functional, but I do like the way that they look. So contrary to popular belief, I do drive the car in the rain sometimes. So being able to have the windows cracked and not worrying about water getting in is a huge benefit for me. And anytime that I can do so using OEM parts, it's a must. Moving along to the rear of the car. So as you can see, yes, we are running a JDM rear bumper. In my opinion, this is the best bumper on these cars. I haven't really met a lot of people that prefer the USDM bumper over the JDM bumper, but nonetheless, I love it on this car. It was already on the car when I got it, so thankfully I didn't have to buy one and have it paint matched and do all of that stuff. But I love the way the JDM bumper looks on this car. You can see that we also have the matching GSR badge here on the rear as well. And we are also still running the rear wiper. Shout out to CJ, who's trying to get me to get rid of it. From the rear, you can see those bumper extensions on the rear stick out just a little bit. It does add a little bit of character to the rear. I'm not a big fan of diffusers or anything like that, so the odds of me ever putting like a Varus diffuser or something like that on the car is pretty slim. I like the way that it looks right now, and I don't really think I'll do much to change that. You can see the exhaust as well. So the exhaust is a RK titanium exhaust. So the car has no cats on it at all, and the downpipe on the car is some no-name 3-inch downpipe that was on the car when I got it. Also running the JDM tail lights as well. Now, without seeing underneath of the hood, you can kind of start guessing the theme of this car. We've got the titanium exhaust, and as you look a little bit closer, we've got some titanium hardware here for the license plate, and the titanium theme continues once we get underneath the hood, so stay tuned. Honestly, guys, that's really it for the exterior. There's really nothing modification-wise that I've done too crazy to the outside of the car. I'm not a huge fan of wide bodies. I'm not a huge fan of fender flares, anything like that. Like I mentioned, I really like the OEM body lines on a car, and I think that particularly in this yellow, also in white, these colors just show the body line so well. My favorite body line being this one right here. Like, look at that. That looks so good. You can see that I'm also running a set of mud flaps on the car. So the mud flaps are a set of rock blocks. I might have got them from the Lancer shop or something like that, but I do think that a set of mud flaps on these cars is it's beneficial. It's one of those modifications that I would recommend to a lot of people. I don't do it for the aesthetics of the car. I know for a fact that the mud flaps have protected my car from things being flung up on the side like rocks and road grime and all of that stuff. And it actually keeps my car a lot cleaner, a lot longer. So I think as long as the mud flaps are adjusted right and they're not sticking out like 3 inches like a Subaru, they kind of just blend in and you don't really notice them until someone points them out. When I bought them, I really wanted them to blend in, so I specifically went with the set that does not have a colored logo. So you can kind of see, the logo right here on the bottom right. I specifically went with a set that was blacked out. I didn't want any color on them. I didn't want to draw any more attention to them than they already have, and I think it works really well with how the car is set up. Let's move on to the interior. So right off the bat, there's nothing crazy going on in here. Just as much as I am a fan of OEM exterior, I really enjoy that clean, simple look on the inside as well. So I tried to emulate that with this car as well. So we'll go over the few things that the car does have. Right off of the bat, this is a factory EVO 8 steering wheel. You can tell by the gray center here. This is merely a cover that I put on it. So I got it from Stitching Cover. The EVO 8 factory steering wheel on this car was in super good shape, like minty fresh. And I wanted to be able to put something on the steering wheel to help preserve that while also incorporating some of the exterior color inside of the car. So I opted to go with the yellow stitching and then the yellow band here at the top. It only took me about an hour and 20 minutes to do, and I think it was well worth it. Most people that see it think that it's an aftermarket wheel on the car. And as far as aesthetics go, I think it improves it just enough to notice that you've done something to it. I'm very pleased with how OEM Plus this cover looks. One of these days, I might get my hands on an EVO 9 steering wheel, but until then, this is going to have to do. The car does have an RK Titanium gauge cluster overlay as well. One of the questions that I get asked all of the time is about the shift light. So the shift light is an Ecliptech shift light. The shift light is fully functional, fully customizable to your desired shift points, and it was in the car when I got it. I don't know that I would install it myself or that I would ever install one in the car, but it was in the car when I bought it, so I'm just going to leave it. As far as system monitoring gauges go, I am running the DEFI or DEFI mechanical or analog, whichever you want to call it, boost gauge. I'm a little bit old school in a sense that I've always loved analog boost gauges. To me, it's therapeutic seeing that boost gauge just wrap out to 30 plus PSI versus just seeing the numbers change on a digital display. But nonetheless, I am running the AEM X Series wideband and oil pressure gauges, both of which are digital displays. Those are housed in a custom center vent gauge pod that I had made. Originally, I went with Ortiz Custom Pods to have one of these made, and when I got it in person, I was extremely displeased with the quality. This is not a video to drag them, but it just is what it is. There was no way that I was going to put that gauge pod in this car. It just was not going to happen. So I sent it back, got my money back, and reached out to I think his name is ES Customs on Instagram. I sent him my original center vent and he was able to construct this custom gauge pod. It's fully customizable in a sense that I did 2 gauges, but you could do 2 and 2, you could do 5 across. It's however you want it to be set up, but he did an amazing job on this. And in all honesty, it looks OEM, and that was the exact look that I was going for in this car. I'm running a simple Sony Bluetooth head unit here, nothing crazy. Might switch out for a full screen, but to be honest, there's so many different ones on the market right now, and trying to figure out the exact one that you want to go with is overwhelming. There's pros and cons to all of it, but eventually I would just have to relocate my HVAC system down here, which brings me to the next point. This car also has a Greddy turbo timer and a Greddy electronic boost controller. Now, I don't use the electronic boost controller because the car is equipped with a Grimspeed electronic boost control solenoid, and the boost is controlled through the ECU. And to be honest, it's not hurting anything sitting here. Same thing goes for the turbo timer. I hardly ever use it, but it's wired in and I don't want to go through the effort of undoing it when everything works perfectly now. The car does have a WK Motorsport shifter in it. If you're looking for any more information on this, I did make a full install video on it, and I'm going to be making a completely separate video giving my update on overall thoughts about the shifter in the car. The long and short of it is I do enjoy it. The resting position is different than stock, so it does kind of take away from that that stock feel of driving a car. Like if you were to get in the car and drive it, it doesn't feel stock when you're driving it like this. It definitely feels race car-y, but I'm gonna make a full video on that later on. I am running these aftermarket floor mats here as well. I have a set of EVO 8 floor mats, but I don't want to mess them up, so I wanted to get something I didn't have to worry about as much. And the car does have an element fire extinguisher that is mounted to a bracket that mounts on either side of the rails for the seats. Speaking of seats, I am running the factory EVO 8 Recaros. Eventually, I would like to get some upgraded seats with some newer technology in them, but for the time being, these seats are working just fine, and I'm actually pleased with how the hyper blue of the wheels ties in to the blue of the seats. The only other thing worth noting is my dash cam. So I'm running the, you might be able to see it here, the Vantrue Nexus 5 or N5 dash cam. It's hardwired into the car and comes on with accessory power. I highly recommend getting a dash cam in a car. It doesn't matter whether it's a Vantrue or whether it's a $120 camera off Amazon. I've been in 2 accidents this year, not in this car, but 2 accidents this year that we had dash cams in the car, and if it wasn't for those dash cams, there would have been no way for us to prove that it wasn't our fault. But yeah, you guys, that pretty much does it for the interior. There's nothing crazy going on in here. The back seat is pretty standard, just a normal back seat. Nobody really ever sits back there. But again, I'm very satisfied with the interior of this car and how OEM it feels. Now, let's move on to what you guys are probably all waiting for, the engine bay. To be honest with you guys, I'm not even sure where to start, so I'm just going to start with the things that you can see, and eventually we'll get into the things that you can't see. So, like I mentioned earlier, the titanium continues from outside the car to the inside of the car. We're running the RK titanium radiator shroud, radiator stays. We've got a custom RK titanium upper radiator pipe. The intake is a 3.5-inch custom RK titanium intake as well. The intercooler piping was specifically fabricated for the ARC intake. So yes, the car is running an ARC intake box on it. There are some contrary opinions on these. A lot of people will claim to have heat soak issues with them or state that they're ineffective or inefficient. And I haven't had any issues with it thus far. So we've decided to keep the ARC intake box in the car. When I bought the ARC intake box, it was gray. I don't know why they had it powder coated. Originally, they come polished, and this one was like a Nardo gray color. So I had it sent off in powder coated black. And to be honest, it fits pretty well in the engine bay. But the intercooler piping was custom made to fit around that. And the intercooler on the car is a Turbo XS intercooler. Originally, it did have the Turbo XS intercooler piping on it as well, but that went away as soon as we did the custom intercooler piping. And the titanium intercooler piping continues all the way down, as you can see. We've got the RK titanium cam sensor shield, RK titanium fuse box cover. We're running a mini battery on the car. It's an Odyssey mini battery with a mini battery tie down as well. The strut bar on the car is RK titanium as well. Titanium heat shield for the valve cover. And all of the studs for the manifold are titanium as well. The manifold itself is a JMF manifold. I got a really good deal on it back when I bought it, and one of these days I might end up changing it up. I'd really love to go with an Archer Fabrications manifold, but in the meantime, this one is working just fine. Carbon fiber coil cover is from Rexpeed, as well as the timing cover. Again, I'm on the fence about these. I really like the OEM Mitsubishi cover, specifically the one that has the Mitsubishi logo on it. So I'm undecided as to whether I'll keep these in or not, but for now, they're just gonna have to stay. We have a spool and up injector resistor in the back. The intake manifold is a Skunk 2 intake manifold with the Skunk 2 manifold dipstick. The fuel rail on the car is OEM, so it's an OEM fuel rail car, OEM fuel pressure regulator. We're running AIC 1650cc injectors. S90 throttle body. The blow-off valve is a tile. You can also see that the wiring harness is, I'd like to consider it semi-tucked, so I was able to cut back the wiring harness. I didn't cut any wires. I just trimmed back the loom and pulled apart each individual injector wire and ran them up underneath of the car and through the runners. So everything that you see here as far as wire tuck goes was done without having to sever any wires on the car. As far as making the engine bay look clean, I think this is an absolute must. And as long as you're willing to dedicate a little bit of time to it, it helps the overall aesthetic of the car significantly. There are some things that are a little bit harder to see on the car, particularly the transmission. So transmission has been gone through by Shepherd transmissions, all new gears, synchro seals, etc. The works, limited slip. We've got EVO 9 first through fifth gears. The car is running an Excetti Stage 1, which for the most part feels just like a stock clutch in the car and handles the power of the car just fine. Braided clutch lines, busher brass bushings, like the works as far as transmissions go. And the transfer case was also gone through by Shep. I mentioned earlier that the car makes 510, so the car makes 510 wheel horsepower at about 31 to 32 pounds of boost on E85. So the car is on a full flex fuel setup. Shout out to Tune by Wally. The flex fuel sensor is actually located on the firewall just behind the intake manifold and is hardwired into the ECU. So we can run 92 or E85 at any given point without having to worry about switching maps. It just calibrates it and does it automatically. The fuel pump on the car is a hardwired Deechworks 300, so external relay that's hardwired to the battery. For the turbo on the car, we are running the AGT twin scroll 62mm turbo. So this particular one, I went with journal bearing. He does provide a ball bearing setup as well. And in my opinion, the 62mm on this car is the sweet spot. So the 57mm also makes some jam on these cars and usually warrants a little bit higher torque, but because the car is on a stock block, we've got stock block, stock head gasket, and ARP head studs, S1 cams, Kigley HLA, all of that good stuff. But because the car is on a factory block, I think the 62mm power band is perfect for this car. I am running the Torque Solution trans mount on this side, and then on this side we do have the engine mount. And out of the 4 engine mount kit, those were the 2 I decided to go with at the recommendation of quite a few people. And eventually I'll make a video giving my review on them, but to sum it up in short, these 2 are probably the only 2 engine mounts that I would, engine or trans mounts that I would do on the car without doing the front one or the rear one, just to keep the vibrations down. We are still running AC in this car, so it is a full street car with AC. So we've still got the AC, it's fully operational. I'm actually still running the factory fan as well on the front and the back, so the AC and the cooling fan, and have never had any problems with the car wanting to overheat at all. And honestly, you guys, I think that is really it. I don't know that there's anything that I missed on the car. If I did, I'll try to make sure that I get it added in or keep you guys updated. But overall, the car is, I'd like to consider well-rounded street car. 500 wheel horsepower, 406 torque with AC is a really sweet spot for these cars. A lot of people like to ask what's next for the car. And as far as anything next, long-term wise, I would really like to build, a built 2.0 on the side and eventually swap it into the car with, some bigger injectors and more fuel. But the way that the car sits right now is so perfect that I just can't bring myself to spend the money on changing it. I really like where the car is at right now. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions about the car, feel free to drop a comment down below or shoot me a message on Instagram, and I'll try to get back to you. But I appreciate you guys tuning in for the full modification breakdown list on my 2003 Lancer Evolution. And yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.